The scream tore from Kira's throat before she could stop it, raw and sharp as broken glass, echoing through the vaulted chamber where candles flickered like dying stars, and a circle of white-haired figures stood frozen around a man whose pale skin seemed to drink in the moonlight streaming through stained glass windows overhead. She hadn't meant to be here. God, she hadn't meant to be anywhere near this place. The night had started with a wrong turn on her way home from her shift at the bookstore, her phone dead, rain pouring down in sheets that turned the city streets into rivers of shadow and neon light. She ducked into what she thought was an unlocked community center to wait out the storm, following a hallway that seemed to slope downward forever, pulled by something she couldn't name, until she'd pushed through heavy wooden doors and stumbled into what looked like a scene from a Gothic nightmare. The man at the center of the circle turned toward her, and Kira's breath caught in her chest. He was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, tall and imposing with hair the color of fresh snow falling past his shoulders, skin so pale it was almost luminescent. His eyes were crimson, bright as fresh blood, and they fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. He wore black robes that seemed to shimmer with embroidered silver patterns, and power radiated from him like heat from a forge. "Stop," he commanded, his voice rolling through the chamber like thunder. The other figures, all with the same otherworldly beauty, the same white hair and marble skin, froze mid-movement. Some had been holding ornate daggers. Others had their hands raised, lips moving in what might have been chants. "Everyone out, now." "But Sire Theron," one of them protested, a woman with hair braided with silver chains. "The ritual must be completed before dawn. The binding cannot be interrupted or—" "I said out." His voice dropped to something dangerous, something that made the candle flames bend away from him. "This human girl is terrified, and you will not witness her fear. You will leave us, and you will speak of this to no one until I give you permission. Do I make myself clear? The vampires, because that's what they had to be," Kira's mind supplied with hysterical clarity. Actual vampires bowed low and filed out through doors she hadn't noticed, set into the stone walls. Within moments, she was alone with the man who had commanded them, standing in a circle of candles that smelled of myrrh and something darker, something she couldn't identify. He moved toward her slowly, carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "You are safe," he said, and his voice had gentled, though it still carried that undercurrent of absolute authority. "I swear it on my blood and my throne. No harm will come to you here." Kira pressed herself against the door she'd entered through, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "What is this? What were you doing? What are you?" "My name is Theron Dimitrescu," he said, stopping a respectful distance away, "and I am the Vampire King of the Eastern Americas. What you interrupted was a binding ritual, one that would have strengthened the wards protecting my people from those who hunt us. It required absolute concentration and perfect timing, aligned with the full moon overhead." He gestured upward, where moonlight painted silver squares on the stone floor. "But none of that matters as much as ensuring you understand that you are not in danger." She laughed, a slightly unhinged sound. "Not in danger? You're a vampire. Vampires drink blood. There's a circle of candles and people with knives, and you're telling me I'm not in danger?" "I stopped everything the moment I saw your fear," Theron said quietly. "A ritual that took 3 months to prepare, that can only be performed during the convergence of specific celestial alignments. I halted it all because I will not have terror attached to my presence, not from someone so clearly innocent in all of this." He took another small step forward, hands held out to show they were empty. "You stumbled into our world by accident. I can see that clearly. Your aura is untainted by the knowledge of what exists in the shadows of your cities." Kira's mind raced. She should run. She should scream again, louder until someone came. But something in his crimson eyes stopped her. Something almost sad, almost lonely, despite the power he clearly commanded. "If you stopped everything for me, won't that cause problems? For you, I mean?" A slight smile touched his lips, transforming his face from intimidating to breathtaking. "Yes, significant ones. The wards will remain weak, my enemies may find openings to exploit, and my council will likely question my judgment for weeks. But I made my choice the moment I saw you, and I stand by it." "Why?" The word came out as barely a whisper, Theron tilted his head, studying her with those impossibly red eyes. Because in 2,000 years of existence, I have learned that power means nothing if it is built on the foundation of another's suffering. You are an innocent, Catherine Shaw, and I would rather face 1,000 enemies than become the source of your nightmares. She jerked in surprise. How do you know my name? Your jacket, he said, nodding toward her chest. She looked down and saw her name tag from the bookstore still pinned there, slightly crooked. And I can hear your heartbeat, smell the coffee you drank hours ago, sense the exhaustion in your bones from a long shift. You were simply trying to get home, weren't you? Kira nodded slowly, some of the terror beginning to ebb, replaced by a strange fascination. I got lost. My phone died, and the rain was so heavy, and I thought this was somewhere I could wait it out. The wards should have prevented any human from finding this place, Theron mused, more to himself than to her. They are designed specifically to repel casual wanderers, to make humans feel suddenly uncomfortable or remember urgent business elsewhere. That you pass through them so easily is unusual. Is that bad? I don't know yet, he admitted, but I intend to find out if you'll permit me to help you. He gestured toward the circle. Would you like to sit down? I imagine you're exhausted, and I promise I will answer any questions you have. Then I will personally ensure you return home safely, with enough money to cover the inconvenience and a complete understanding of how to avoid our world in the future, if that is your wish. Against all reason, against every survival instinct screaming at her to flee, Kira found herself nodding. There was something about Theron that drew her in, something beyond the obvious beauty and power. He had stopped everything, a ritual that clearly mattered, that involved what looked like his entire court just to make sure she wasn't afraid. That had to count for something. She walked slowly into the chamber, her sneakers scuffing against ancient stone, and sat on a bench carved from what looked like black marble. Theron settled across from her, maintaining that careful distance, and with a wave of his hand, the candles burned brighter, pushing back the shadows. What do you want to know? He asked gently. Everything, Kira breathed. I want to know everything. Over the next hour, Theron spoke, and Kira listened with rapt attention as he unveiled a world she'd never imagined existed beneath the surface of her ordinary life. He told her about the vampire courts that stretched across the globe, ancient hierarchies that predated most human civilizations. He explained their weaknesses: sunlight, which burned their skin and sapped their strength, though it wouldn't kill them as quickly as movies suggested. Wooden stakes through the heart were fatal, but so were most forms of decapitation or severe trauma. They needed blood to survive, though most modern vampires had arrangements with blood banks or willing donors bound by strict laws that prohibited killing or turning humans without consent. We are not mindless monsters, Theron said, his voice carrying a weight of conviction. We have laws, codes of honor, systems of justice that are older and more stringent than anything in the human world. Those who break our laws, who harm innocents or create progeny recklessly, face punishments that make human prisons look merciful. But you do drink blood, Kira said, trying to keep her voice steady. Yes, it is our nature, just as eating is yours. But we do not hunt, we do not terrify, and we do not drain the innocent dry. Those who do are executed swiftly and without mercy. His eyes flickered with something dark. I have personally ended the existence of vampires who violated our laws. I will not permit my people to become the monsters humans fear. Kira found herself relaxing incrementally. What was the ritual for? The one I interrupted. Theron's expression grew troubled. There are those who hunt us, organizations that have existed for centuries with the sole purpose of eradicating all vampires. They have become more sophisticated in recent decades, using technology to track our movements, identify our sanctuaries. The ritual was meant to strengthen the protective wards around our main stronghold beneath the city, to keep them from pinpointing our location. Without it, he trailed off, shaking his head. We will manage. We always do. Guilt twisted in Kira's stomach. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ruin anything. You ruined nothing, Theron said firmly. You simply existed in the wrong place at the wrong time, through no fault of your own. If anything, this is on me for not maintaining stronger wards in the outer corridors. You should never have been able to penetrate so deeply into our sanctuary." "You keep saying that like it's strange," Kira said. "Is it really that unusual?" "Profoundly so. The wards are layered, complex magical constructs that have been refined over centuries. For a human to pass through them without even noticing suggests either an extraordinary natural resistance to magic, or—" He hesitated. Or what? "Or you're meant to be here," Theron finished quietly. "There are old legends, prophecies really, about humans who would walk freely into vampire sanctuaries, who would pass through every barrier as if they didn't exist. They are said to be catalysts, individuals whose very presence changes the course of history." Kira laughed nervously. "I'm a 23-year-old bookstore clerk who can barely afford her rent. I'm not anyone special, and I'm definitely not changing any history." Theron's gaze was intense, searching. "Perhaps you don't see it yet, but I have learned to trust in the currents of fate, especially when they bring something as unexpected as you into my world." The way he said "you" made warmth bloom in Kira's chest, a fluttering sensation that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the magnetic pull she felt toward this impossible man. "What happens now?" "Now, I keep my promise," Theron said, rising gracefully to his feet. "I will escort you home, ensure your safety, and give you the means to avoid accidentally stumbling into our world again. Unless—" He paused, something hopeful flickering in his crimson eyes. "Unless you would prefer to learn more, to understand the world you've discovered, I would be honored to serve as your guide, if you're willing." Kira stood as well, her mind warring with itself. Every rational thought told her to run, to forget this ever happened, to return to her normal life. But when she looked at Theron, when she met those ancient, sad, incredibly kind eyes, she found herself wanting to stay, to learn, to understand this beautiful, dangerous man who had given up something important just to protect her feelings. "I want to know more," she heard herself say, "if that's allowed, if it won't get you in trouble." Theron's smile was radiant, transforming him into something beyond beauty, something almost divine. "You're allowed anything you wish, Catherine Shaw, and I would face down all the troubles in the world for the chance to spend more time in your presence." He offered his hand, and after only a moment's hesitation, Kira took it. His skin was cool but not cold, his grip gentle but unmistakably strong. "Come, let me show you the rest of the sanctuary, and then I will take you home. Tomorrow evening, if you are still interested, I will send a car for you, and we can continue this conversation somewhere more comfortable." As Theron led her through corridors carved from living stone, past chambers filled with artwork that must have been priceless, through halls where vampires bowed to their king and stared at her with unconcealed curiosity, Kira felt her life pivoting on an axis she hadn't known existed. Everything was changing, had already changed the moment she'd stumbled through those doors and met the crimson gaze of a vampire king who valued her comfort over his own power. The sanctuary beneath the city was vast beyond imagination, a labyrinth of connected spaces that seemed to span miles. Theron explained that it had been built over centuries, expanded and refined as the vampire population grew and their needs evolved. There were living quarters for the court members, libraries filled with books in languages Kira didn't recognize, training rooms where vampires practiced combat with weapons both ancient and modern, and even what looked like a throne room, all black marble and silver filigree, dominated by a massive chair that seemed carved from a single piece of obsidian. "This is where I hold court," Theron said, gesturing to the throne, "where I hear disputes, pass judgment, make the decisions that affect my people. It is not as glamorous as it sounds. Most nights involve tedious arguments about territory boundaries or resource allocation." "It must be lonely," Kira said without thinking, then immediately wanted to take it back. But Theron simply looked at her with something like gratitude. "Yes," he said softly, "it is profoundly lonely. Power isolates, and immortality even more so. I have advisors, subjects, even friends after a fashion, but there are very few I can simply be with. Very few who see me as anything other than the king." "What do you want them to see?" Theron was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. Someone who is trying his best, someone who cares deeply about protecting those under his care, but who sometimes doubts whether he is making the right choices. Someone who is tired of centuries of political maneuvering and would rather spend his evenings reading poetry or listening to music. He turned back to her, and there was a vulnerability in his expression that made her heart ache. Someone who is just Theron, not sire or king or lord, just myself. Kira stepped closer, drawn by an impulse she didn't fully understand. I see that. I saw it the moment you stopped the ritual. You didn't have to do that, but you did. Because you're the kind of person who puts others first, even when it costs you. You barely know me, Theron whispered, but he didn't move away. I know enough, Kira said, and she meant it. In the short time they'd spent together, she'd seen more genuine kindness, more real concern than she'd experienced from most of the humans in her life. There was something about Theron that resonated with her, that felt like recognition, like coming home to a place she'd never been. Theron reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to retreat, and gently tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear. His touch was feather-light, reverent. You are remarkable, Catherine. You stumble into a vampire ritual, face down the king of all nightmares, and instead of fleeing, you offer compassion. You are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Maybe both, Kira said with a small smile. My mom always said I had more heart than sense. I find I am quite grateful for that, Theron murmured. Then he seemed to shake himself, stepping back and offering his arm in a courtly gesture. Come, the rain has stopped, and I should get you home before you collapse from exhaustion. I can feel how tired you are, how your energy is flagging. Kira took his arm, marveling at how natural it felt, and let him guide her through more corridors until they emerged into what looked like an underground parking garage, filled with luxury cars that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Theron led her to a sleek black vehicle that looked like something from a spy movie, and opened the door for her with old-world courtesy. The drive through the city was quiet, comfortable. Theron had insisted she give him her address, promising that he would ensure her safety, and true to his word, he drove carefully, navigating the late-night streets with practiced ease. Kira found herself studying his profile in the dim light from the dashboard, the aristocratic lines of his face, the way his long white hair caught the streetlights as they passed beneath them. You're staring, Theron said, amusement coloring his tone. Sorry, Kira said, not feeling sorry at all. I'm just trying to process everything. A few hours ago I thought vampires were fiction. Now I'm in a car with a vampire king who's driving me home. It's a lot. I can imagine. If you need time to process, to decide this is all too much, I will understand. I will not hold it against you if you choose to return to your normal life and never speak to me again. Is that what you want? Kira asked. Theron's hands tightened on the steering wheel. No. What I want is to see you again, to learn everything about you, to hear your thoughts on books and music and all the small things that make up a life. What I want is entirely selfish and probably inadvisable, but I cannot seem to help myself. You have captivated me, Catherine Shaw, in a way I did not think possible anymore. Warmth flooded through Kira, chasing away the last of her fear. The bookstore closes at 9 tomorrow night. I get off at 9:30. Then I will have a car waiting for you at 9:30, Theron said, and his smile was brilliant. We can have dinner, or rather, you can have dinner while I keep you company, and we can talk properly. Does that appeal to you? Very much, Kira said, surprised by how much she meant it. When they pulled up outside her modest apartment building, Theron insisted on walking her to her door, his presence commanding and protective as they climbed the stairs to her third-floor unit. At her door, he took her hand and bowed over it, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that was so courtly, so genuinely respectful, that it made her breath catch. Until tomorrow evening, Catherine, he said softly. Thank you for your kindness, your curiosity, and your remarkable courage. You have given me something I had not experienced in far too long. What's that? Kira asked. Hope, Theron said simply. Then he was gone, moving with that supernatural speed down the hallway, leaving her standing at her door with her heart racing and her mind spinning with possibilities. Kira barely slept that night, her thoughts consumed by crimson eyes and gentle hands, by a vampire king who had stopped everything to shield her from fear. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of candlelight and marble halls, of a voice like thunder and touch like silk, and woke with the absolute certainty that her life would never be the same again. The next day at the bookstore dragged by with excruciating slowness. Kira found herself watching the clock, counting down the hours until 9:30, until she would see Theron again. Her co-worker, a college student named Maya, noticed her distraction and teased her about having a hot date, and Kira couldn't deny it without lying outright. She did have a date, even if it was with someone who technically wasn't alive in the traditional sense. When 9:30 finally arrived, Kira practically ran out of the store, and sure enough, there was a sleek black car waiting at the curb, a driver in a neat suit holding the door open for her. She slid into the back seat and found Theron waiting, dressed in dark slacks and a charcoal shirt that made his white hair seem to glow in the dim interior light. "Catherine," he greeted, and the warmth in his voice made her smile. "You look lovely." She glanced down at her simple dress and cardigan, the nicest things she owned that weren't work clothes. "I didn't have anything fancy. You could be wearing rags and still be the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," Theron said seriously. "Beauty radiates from within, and yours is blinding." Kira felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You're quite the charmer for a 2,000-year-old vampire king." "I've had plenty of time to practice," Theron said with a slight grin. "Though I assure you, with you, I am merely speaking the truth." The driver took them to a restaurant that was clearly exclusive, the kind of place where reservations were made months in advance and the prices weren't even listed on the menu. But when they arrived, the staff treated Theron with the kind of deference that spoke of either vast wealth or genuine fear, possibly both. They were shown to a private room, all soft lighting and elegant decor, where a table had been set for one, with a comfortable chair positioned nearby for Theron. "I hope this isn't too much," Theron said as Kira settled into her seat. "I wanted somewhere we could speak privately, without fear of being overheard or interrupted." "It's perfect," Kira said honestly, "though I feel a bit guilty eating when you can't." "Please, do not. I find genuine pleasure in watching others enjoy food. It is one of the few mortal experiences I miss, the taste of a perfectly prepared meal." He leaned back in his chair, looking relaxed in a way she suspected was rare for him. "Tell me about yourself, Catherine. Who are you when you're not accidentally interrupting vampire rituals?" So Kira talked, and found herself sharing things she rarely told anyone. She spoke about her childhood in a small town upstate, how her parents had died in a car accident when she was 19, leaving her alone with student loans and grief she was still processing. She talked about her love of books, how she'd dropped out of college to take the bookstore job, because she'd needed income immediately and had somehow never left. She shared her dreams of maybe writing someday, though she always felt too exhausted after work to actually put words on the page. Theron listened with complete attention, asking thoughtful questions, expressing genuine interest in every detail. When the food arrived, course after exquisite course that Kira couldn't possibly finish, he encouraged her to taste everything, to tell him about the flavors and textures, and seemed to take real joy in her descriptions. "You make the simplest things sound magical," he said at one point. "The way you describe the food, it's like poetry." "That's just how I experience things," Kira said with a shrug. "Everything is a story waiting to be told, you know? Even something as ordinary as a meal." "There is nothing ordinary about you," Theron said softly. "You have this incredible light, Catherine. It draws people in, makes them want to be better, to see the world through your eyes." "Now you're definitely flattering me," Kira said, but she was smiling. "I promise you I am not." Theron leaned forward, his crimson gaze intense. "I have existed for 2 millennia. I have known emperors and artists, warriors and scholars. I have seen the rise and fall of civilizations, witnessed the full spectrum of human nature from its darkest depths to its most transcendent heights. And in all that time, I have rarely met anyone who possesses your particular combination of kindness, courage, and genuine wonder at the world. You are special, Catherine, whether you recognize it or not." Kira felt tears prick at her eyes. "Why me? Why are you being so kind to me?" "Because from the moment I saw you, terrified and brave in that ritual chamber, I felt something I have not experienced in centuries. A connection, immediate and undeniable, like recognition at the level of the soul." Theron reached across the table, and Kira didn't hesitate to place her hand in his. "I know this is fast. Perhaps too fast by mortal standards, But when you have lived as long as I have, you learn to recognize the moments that matter, the people who will change everything. You are one of those people, Catherine. I feel it with absolute certainty. I feel it too, Kira whispered. It's crazy, and I should probably be running in the opposite direction, but I feel like I've been waiting my whole life to meet you. Theron's expression softened into something achingly vulnerable. May I confess something? Anything. I was beginning to believe I would spend eternity alone, disconnected from genuine feeling, going through the motions of ruling and existing, but never truly living. And then you stumbled into my ritual, and everything changed. You woke something in me I thought had died centuries ago, something that wants to hope, to feel, to love. The word hung between them, heavy with implication, and Kira felt her heart racing. Theron, too much? He asked, a hint of uncertainty in his ancient eyes. No, Kira said firmly, not too much, just overwhelming in the best possible way. She squeezed his hand. I want this. Whatever this is, wherever it goes, I want to explore it with you. Theron lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent shivers down her spine. Then we will take this at whatever pace you need. I will not rush you, will not push for more than you are comfortable giving. But I want you to know that from this moment forward, you are under my protection. Anyone who wishes you harm will have to go through me first, and I assure you, I am not easy to get through. The fierce protectiveness in his voice should have been frightening, but instead, it made Kira feel safer than she had in years, since before her parents died and the world became an uncertain, lonely place. What does that mean exactly, being under your protection? It means that I will ensure your safety, your well-being, your happiness, to the best of my considerable abilities. It means that you need never fear again, never struggle alone. If you have needs, I will meet them. If you have enemies, I will eliminate them. If you have dreams, I will help you achieve them. Theron's gaze was unwavering. It means that you have become important to me, Catherine, more important than rituals or politics or any of the 1,000 concerns that typically occupy my time. That's a lot, Kira managed. It is. And if it is too much, if you need me to step back, I will. But I wanted you to understand what you mean to me, what you have come to mean in such an impossibly short time. Kira thought about it, about what he was offering, what it would mean to accept the protection and care of a vampire king. It was insane, completely irrational, the kind of decision her logical mind screamed against. But her heart, that traitorous organ that had recognized Theron from the first moment their eyes met, knew exactly what it wanted. I accept, she said quietly. Your protection, your care, all of it. I accept. Theron's smile was radiant, and he stood moving around the table with fluid grace to pull her gently to her feet. Thank you, he murmured, and then his lips were on hers, soft and cool and perfect, kissing her with a tenderness that made her melt against him. The kiss was slow, exploratory, Theron clearly holding himself in check even as Kira felt the leashed power in him, the strength that could have crushed her, but instead cradled her like something infinitely precious. When they finally parted, both of them were breathing heavily, though Theron didn't technically need to breathe at all. I have wanted to do that since the moment I first saw you, Theron confessed, his forehead resting against hers. Then we've wasted time, Kira said with a slightly giddy laugh. You should have kissed me hours ago. I will endeavor to make up for lost time, Theron promised, and proceeded to do exactly that, kissing her until she was dizzy with it, until the world narrowed to just the two of them and the impossible, perfect connection that seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and deep conversations. Theron sent his car for Kira every evening after work, and they would spend hours together, sometimes in private restaurants, sometimes in the sanctuary beneath the city, sometimes simply driving through the night while she told him stories, and he listened with that focused attention that made her feel like the most important person in the world. He introduced her properly to his court, which caused a considerable stir. Vampires who had lived for centuries stared at her with unconcealed curiosity, whispering among themselves about the human who had captured their king's heart. Theron's second in command, a formidable vampire named Lucian Corvus with braided white hair and eyes like chips of ice, was particularly skeptical. "Sire, you must see the political implications," Lucian said one evening when he thought Kira was out of earshot. She'd been exploring the sanctuary library but had paused at the sound of voices carrying from Theron's study. "A human consort? The other courts will see it as weakness, an invitation to challenge your authority." "Then let them come," Theron said, his voice hard as steel. "I will remind them exactly why I am king and why challenging me has always been a fatal mistake. Catherine is not a weakness, Lucian. She is the greatest strength I have ever known." "How can you possibly believe that?" Lucian demanded. "She is mortal, fragile, completely vulnerable to our enemies. If anyone wanted to strike at you, she would be the obvious target. Which is why I have tripled the guard and placed wards specifically keyed to her protection around her apartment, her workplace, and every route between them and the sanctuary." Theron's tone brooked no argument. "No one will touch her. I will see to that personally. And when she ages, when she dies, as all mortals do, what then?" There was a long silence. "I do not know," Theron admitted finally. "I know only that she has given me a reason to feel again, to care about something beyond mere survival and duty. I will not give that up, not for politics, not for safety, not for anything." Kira's heart clenched. She hadn't let herself think about the implications of mortality, about what it would mean to love someone who would live forever while she aged and died within a mere handful of decades from his perspective. But hearing the pain in Theron's voice, she knew he had thought about it, that it weighed on him even as he chose to be with her anyway. She stepped into the doorway of the study, and both vampires turned toward her. "I'm sorry for eavesdropping," she said quietly, "but I need to say something." Theron was at her side in an instant. "Catherine, you didn't need to hear that. Lucian was just being realistic," Kira finished. "And he's right. I am mortal and fragile and probably a political nightmare for you. But I'm also choosing to be here, knowing all of that. I'm choosing you, Theron, for however long we have together. Whether that's decades or just years, I want to spend them with you." Theron pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in existence. "You are worth any political complication," he murmured into her hair. "You are worth everything." Lucian sighed, but there was a grudging respect in his icy eyes. "Very well. If this is your choice, sire, then I will support it. But allow me to increase security further. If Lady Catherine is to be part of your life, we must ensure her safety absolutely." "Agreed," Theron said. "Whatever you think is necessary." Over the following weeks, Kira noticed the increased protection. There were always vampires nearby now, discreet but present, watching over her with the same intensity they showed their king. At first it was unnerving, but she came to appreciate it, especially when Theron explained about the Hunters, the organizations dedicated to eradicating vampires. "They will not distinguish between a vampire and a human who associates with vampires," Theron told her seriously. "If they discover our connection, they will see you as either a collaborator or a victim to be rescued. Either way, you would be in danger." "Have you had problems with Hunters recently?" Kira asked. Theron's expression darkened. "More than usual. Since the ritual was interrupted, the wards have been weaker than I would like. We have detected several incursions into the outer tunnels, scouts testing our defenses. So far my guards have repelled them, but it is only a matter of time before they mount a more serious attack." Guilt gnawed at Kira. "This is my fault. If I hadn't interrupted the ritual—" "Do not," Theron said firmly, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "Do not take responsibility for this. The Hunters have been a threat for centuries, long before you entered my life. Yes, the wards are weaker, but we are adapting, finding new ways to protect ourselves, and I would go through it all again, would sacrifice 100 rituals for the chance to have you in my life. I just hate that I'm causing you problems," Kira whispered. "You are not a problem," Theron said, kissing her softly. "You are the solution to a loneliness I had learned to accept as permanent. You are hope and joy and everything good that I thought was lost to me forever. Never doubt your worth, Catherine. Not to me, and not to yourself." It was around the 2-month mark of their relationship that things came to a head. Kira was leaving work, heading toward the black car that always waited for her now, when she noticed the street was unusually empty. The driver who normally greeted her with a respectful nod was slumped in his seat, and there was blood on the window. Terror spiked through her, and she started to back away, but strong hands grabbed her from behind, and something sharp pressed against her throat. "Don't scream!" a male voice growled in her ear. "Don't struggle! You're coming with us!" Kira's mind raced. The guards that were supposed to be watching her were nowhere to be seen, which meant these people hunters, she realized with sick certainty, had somehow neutralized them. She thought about Theron, about how frantic he would be when she didn't arrive at the sanctuary, and forced herself to stay calm. "What do you want?" she managed to ask. "Information," the man said, "about the Vampire King and his sanctuary. You're going to tell us everything you know, and then we're going to use it to end him and all his kind." "I'll never help you," Kira said, and was rewarded with the knife pressing harder against her skin, a line of hot pain that meant he'd drawn blood. "We'll see about that." They dragged her toward a van parked in the alley, and Kira knew if they got her inside, she was as good as dead. She had to do something, had to fight or escape, or at least leave some sign for Theron to find. So she went limp suddenly, dropping her full weight and throwing her captors off balance. The knife sliced deeper, and she felt blood running down her neck, but it gave her the split second she needed to wrench free and run. She didn't get far. There were 3 of them, all larger and faster than her, and they tackled her to the ground. Kira screamed, loud and piercing, hoping against hope that someone would hear, that the vampire guards were just incapacitated and not dead, that somehow Theron would know she needed him. Then, the hunters were gone, lifted away from her by a force like a hurricane, and Theron was there, his eyes blazing crimson fire, his face a mask of absolute fury. He moved like violence incarnate, faster than the human eye could track, and the hunters didn't stand a chance. Within seconds, all 3 were on the ground, unconscious or dead. Kira couldn't tell which. Then Theron was kneeling beside her, his hands gentle as they touched her face, her neck where blood still flowed freely. "Catherine," he breathed, and his voice shook with an emotion she'd never heard from him before, raw, desperate fear. "My God, Catherine, you're hurt." "I'm okay," she tried to say, but her voice came out thready and weak. "I fought them. I didn't tell them anything." "Hush," Theron commanded softly. "Don't speak. Save your strength." He gathered her into his arms and stood, moving with that supernatural speed through the streets. Kira caught glimpses of the city blurring past, and then they were in the sanctuary, and Theron was shouting for healers, for his best physicians, his voice cracking with desperation. Vampires swarmed around them, and Kira was placed on something soft. Hands touched her neck, and she heard voices discussing the wound, debating treatments. Through it all, Theron held her hand, his grip almost painfully tight, as if he could keep her tethered to life through sheer force of will. "The wound is not deep enough to be fatal," someone said Lucian, she thought, "but she has lost blood, and she's going into shock. We need to warm her, keep her stable." "Do whatever is necessary," Theron commanded. "I don't care what it costs, what favors I must call in, what prices must be paid. Save her." "Sire," another voice said hesitantly, "there is one option that would ensure her survival completely, but it would require her consent, and it would change everything." Kira felt Theron stiffen beside her. "No," he said flatly. "We will not discuss that. Not now, not when she cannot properly consent." "What option?" Kira managed to ask, forcing her eyes open. The world swam in and out of focus, but she could see Theron's face above her, pale and drawn with worry. "Catherine, don't try to talk," Theron said, but she squeezed his hand weakly. "Tell me." Theron closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, there was anguish in their crimson depths. "They speak of turning you, of making you a vampire. My blood could heal your wound instantly, could make you immortal, strong, safe from harm. But it would also take away your humanity, your ability to walk in sunlight, to live the normal life you deserve. And I will not make that choice for you, especially not when you are injured and frightened." Kira's mind was fuzzy from blood loss, but she understood what he was offering, what it would mean. Would I be with you? If I became a vampire?" "Yes," Theron whispered, "for as long as you wanted me, for eternity if you would have me." "Then do it," Kira said. "Turn me. I choose you, Theron. I choose this life, this world. I choose forever with you. Catherine, you cannot possibly make this decision rationally right now. You are hurt, you are scared." I'm neither, Kira interrupted, and she wasn't. Despite the pain, despite the blood loss, she felt completely clear, completely certain. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you, Theron Dimitrescu. I love you, and I want to spend eternity with you, if you'll have me. Theron made a sound that might have been a sob. I love you, he said, his voice breaking. I love you more than I thought possible, more than I have loved anything in 2,000 years of existence. Are you absolutely certain? Because once this is done, there is no going back. I'm certain, Kira said. Make me yours, completely. Theron looked around at his gathered court. Bear witness, he said formally. Catherine Shaw consents freely and of her own will to the transformation. Let no one ever claim otherwise. Then he bent to her neck, to the wound the hunters had made, and Kira felt his fangs pierce her skin. It should have hurt, but instead it felt like falling, like flying, like coming home. She felt her blood flowing into him, felt her strength fading, and just when she thought she might slip away entirely, Theron pulled back. Drink, he commanded, and his wrist was at her lips, blood welling from a cut he must have made. Drink and live, my love. Drink and stay with me forever. Kira drank, and the taste of his blood was nothing like she expected. It was sweet and rich and full of power, filling her with strength that drove back the darkness. She drank deeply, greedily, until Theron gently pulled his wrist away. That's enough for now, he murmured. Rest. Let the change take hold. I will be here with you through every moment of it. The transformation took 3 days, and they were the longest, most painful days of Kira's life. Her body burned as it remade itself, as mortality gave way to immortality, as humanity became something other. Through it all, Theron never left her side, holding her hand, speaking softly to her, his presence the only anchor she had in a sea of agony. When she finally woke on the 4th day, everything was different. The room was sharper, clearer, every detail standing out in vivid relief. She could hear conversations happening rooms away, could smell things she'd never noticed before, could feel the weight of the air on her skin. And when she looked at Theron, sitting in a chair beside her bed looking exhausted despite his immortality, her heart swelled with love so intense it nearly overwhelmed her. Theron, she whispered, and he was instantly alert, leaning forward to take her hand. Catherine, how do you feel? She took inventory of her new body, marveling at the strength in her limbs, the complete absence of pain. I feel incredible, powerful, alive in a way I've never been. Theron's smile was radiant. Your eyes have changed. They are crimson now, like mine, and your hair. He reached out to touch it, wonder in his expression. It has turned white, like moonlight. You are breathtaking, my love, the most beautiful vampire I have ever seen. Kira sat up, moving with a fluid grace that was new and strange, and caught sight of herself in a mirror across the room. She gasped. Theron was right. Her eyes were now brilliant red, and her hair, which had been dark brown, was now pure white, falling in waves around a face that was sharper, more refined than she remembered. She looked like she belonged to his world now, looked like she could stand at his side as an equal. I'm really a vampire, she breathed. You are, Theron confirmed. A vampire, my consort, my love, and if you will accept it, my queen. Kira turned to stare at him. Your queen? Theron slid from the chair to kneel beside the bed, taking both of her hands in his. I have ruled alone for centuries, Catherine. I have never wanted to share my throne, never found anyone worthy of standing beside me as an equal. But you have changed everything. You are brave, kind, fierce when you need to be, and you have already proven yourself willing to sacrifice for my people by accepting this transformation. I can think of no one I would rather have as my partner in all things for all of eternity. Will you marry me, Catherine? Will you become my queen and rule at my side? Tears spilled down Kira's cheeks, and she laughed, a sound of pure joy. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. I will marry you. I will be your queen. I will spend forever making you as happy as you make me. Theron surged up to kiss her, and it was different now. Now that they were the same, both immortal, both powerful. The kiss was fire and ice, passion and tenderness, a promise of eternity sealed between their lips. When they finally parted, both of them were grinning like fools. "We should make the announcement to the court," Theron said. "They will need time to prepare for the ceremony. A royal wedding is a significant event, one that has not occurred in my reign." "How long have you been king?" Kira asked, suddenly realizing she'd never actually asked. 800 years, Theron said. "I took the throne after the previous king became unstable. Too much time, too much power, not enough humanity left to temper his decisions. The court asked me to challenge him, and I did. I won, and I have ruled ever since." "Have you ever been close to marrying before?" "Never. There have been lovers over the centuries, relationships that lasted decades or even centuries before fading. But none of them were like you, Catherine. None of them made me feel the way you do, like I have found the missing piece of myself I didn't know was absent." Kira cupped his face in her hands, marveling at how she could now see every minute detail, every flicker of emotion in his ancient eyes. "I love you. I will love you for eternity, and I will do everything in my power to be the queen your people deserve." "You already are," Theron assured her. "Come, let me introduce you properly to the court, not as my protected human, but as my chosen queen." He helped her from the bed, and Kira was amazed at how steady she felt, how natural this new body seemed already. Theron led her to an adjoining room where clothes had been laid out, beautiful gowns in rich fabrics that looked like they cost a fortune. With his help, she dressed in a deep crimson dress that complemented her new coloring perfectly, and then they walked together through the sanctuary to the throne room. Word must have spread quickly, because the room was packed with vampires, all of them turning to watch as Theron led Kira to the dais where his obsidian throne sat. Instead of taking the seat himself, he positioned Kira in front of it and addressed the assembled court. "My people," he said, his voice carrying through the chamber with undeniable authority. "You all know Catherine Shaw, the human who stumbled into our world and into my heart. Today, I present her to you not as a human, but as one of us, transformed by choice and consent into a vampire. More than that, I present her as my chosen consort, my betrothed, and your future queen." A ripple of shock went through the crowd, followed by murmurs of conversation. Lucian stepped forward, and Kira tensed, but he knelt before her, his head bowed. "Lady Catherine," he said formally, "I confess I had my doubts about you, but you have proven yourself willing to sacrifice your mortality for our king, to embrace this life fully and without reservation. If Sire Theron has chosen you as his queen, then I pledge you my loyalty and my service." One by one, the other vampires knelt as well, until the entire court was bowing to her, acknowledging her new status. Kira felt overwhelmed, humbled, and deeply grateful for the trust they were placing in her. "Thank you," she said, projecting her voice the way Theron had taught her. "I know I have much to learn about your world, about what it means to be a vampire and a queen. But I promise you I will learn, I will grow, and I will serve this court to the best of my abilities. Together with Theron, I will work to protect our people and ensure our future." Theron's hand found hers, squeezing gently, and when she looked at him, his expression was one of pure pride and love. "Well spoken, my queen." The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. The wedding was planned for the next full moon, a date that held significance in vampire culture. Kira was tutored in vampire history, politics, and protocols by a rotating cast of court members who seemed determined to ensure she would not embarrass herself or Theron. She learned about the other vampire courts around the world, the delicate balance of power and alliances that kept their society functioning. She trained in combat with Lucian, who proved to be a demanding but effective teacher, pushing her to master her new vampire strength and speed. "You are the queen," he told her during one session, after he'd knocked her flat for the third time. "You must be able to defend yourself and your people. The hunters will not rest simply because we have a new royal wedding. If anything, they will see it as an opportunity." Kira picked herself up, wiping blood from her split lip, a wound that healed even as she watched. "Then teach me to fight them properly." Lucian's icy eyes gleamed with approval. "With pleasure, my queen." In the evenings, Kira spent time with Theron, and those hours were her favorite. They would walk through the sanctuary gardens, underground spaces filled with plants that thrived in artificial light, and talk about everything and nothing. Theron taught her about vampire abilities she hadn't discovered yet, like the way they could sense emotions in humans, or how elder vampires could move objects with their minds if they were powerful enough. Will I be able to do that? Kira asked, fascinated. Perhaps in time. You are already stronger than most newly turned vampires, likely because you have my blood in you, royal blood. It amplifies natural abilities. Theron pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her waist. But I hope you never need to use your power in combat. I want to keep you safe, protected, loved. I know you do, Kira said, turning in his embrace to face him, but I also know that being your queen means sharing in the dangers as well as the joys. I won't hide while you face threats, Theron. We're partners now, equals. Where you go, I go. You're going to give me centuries of worry, aren't you? Theron asked, but he was smiling. Absolutely, Kira confirmed, and kissed him deeply. The night of the wedding arrived with a sense of both celebration and tension. Theron had increased security to unprecedented levels, unwilling to take any chances with hunters, potentially using the gathering as an opportunity to strike. The ceremony would take place in the throne room, witnessed by the entire court and representatives from other vampire territories who had traveled to attend. Kira stood in her preparation chamber, attended by several vampire women who had become something like friends over the past weeks, and stared at herself in the mirror. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of white silk and silver embroidery, cut to emphasize her new regal bearing. Her white hair had been styled in an elaborate updo woven with silver chains and gemstones, and her crimson eyes seemed to glow with anticipation. "You look perfect," said Serafina, one of her attendants. "The king will be speechless." "I hope not," Kira said with a nervous laugh. "He has to recite vows. You know what I mean. He will be overcome with the beauty of his bride." There was a knock at the door, and Lucian's voice called through. "It is time, my queen. Sire Theron awaits you in the throne room." Kira took a deep breath, steadying herself, and nodded. "I'm ready." The walk to the throne room felt both endless and too short. When the doors opened and she saw the assembled court, every vampire dressed in their finest, and Theron standing at the altar in black robes embroidered with silver that matched her dress, her nervousness melted away. He was breathtaking, and the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered made her heart soar. She walked down the aisle alone, as was vampire custom, signifying that she came to this union of her own free will, unbowed and unforced. When she reached Theron, he took her hands, and his smile was radiant. The ceremony was conducted by the eldest vampire in the court, a woman named Morgana, who claimed to have been turned during the Roman Empire. She spoke in ancient languages and modern English both, binding them together with words that had been used for countless vampire marriages over millennia. They exchanged vows, speaking promises of eternal devotion, of partnership through all the long centuries ahead, of love that would endure beyond the ending of stars. When it came time to seal their union, Theron pulled Kira close and kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. The court erupted in applause, and when they parted, Morgana raised her hands for silence. "I present to you Theron Dimitrescu, vampire king of the Eastern Americas, and his queen consort, Catherine Dimitrescu. May their reign be long, their love eternal, and their partnership unbreakable." The celebration that followed was magnificent, a feast where Kira learned that vampires could consume other things besides blood-fine wines, rich broths, foods carefully prepared to be compatible with their altered physiology. There was music and dancing, and when Theron led her in a waltz that was probably centuries old, Kira felt like she was living in a fairy tale, the kind where the girl gets to keep her prince forever. In the quiet hours before dawn, after the guests had departed and the court had returned to their quarters, Theron led Kira to chambers she'd never seen before, rooms he explained had been prepared specifically for them, for their married life together. The space was beautiful, decorated in shades of midnight blue and silver, with a massive bed that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of dark wood. "Welcome home, my queen," Theron said softly, pulling her into his arms. "Home," Kira echoed, and the word had never felt more right. This was home now, not the cramped apartment she'd left behind, but here, in the sanctuary, with Theron and the life they would build together. They made love that night for the first time since her transformation, and it was different from anything Kira had experienced as a human. Her new vampire senses amplified everything, made every touch electric, every kiss a revelation. They learned each other's bodies with reverence and passion, and when they finally lay tangled together in the afterglow, Kira felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. "I love you," she whispered against Theron's chest. "I will love you for all of eternity." "And I you," Theron murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "You are my everything, Catherine, my queen, my wife, my love, my reason for existing beyond mere survival. You have given me hope and joy and purpose, and I will spend forever trying to deserve you." "You already do," Kira said. "You have from the very beginning, from the moment you stopped everything to shield me from fear. You're a good man, Theron. Despite what you are, despite the centuries of blood and politics, you're good and kind, and I am so incredibly lucky to have found you." They lay together in comfortable silence until Theron spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "We should address the hunter problem soon. Now that the wedding is complete, I can focus on strengthening our defenses properly." "Can we redo the ritual?" Kira asked. "The one I interrupted?" "Possibly. It would require waiting for the next celestial alignment, which is 3 months away. Until then, we will have to rely on conventional security measures." He paused. "Though I have been considering a more permanent solution." "What kind of solution?" "Opening negotiations with the hunter organizations. Not all of them are unreasonable zealots. Some are simply trying to protect humanity from what they perceive as predators. If we could demonstrate that my court poses no threat to innocence, that we have strict laws preventing the kind of behavior they fear, we might be able to reach a truce." Kira propped herself up on her elbow to look at him. "You would negotiate with people who want to kill you?" "I would negotiate with anyone if it meant protecting my people and keeping you safe," Theron said seriously. "War is costly, both in lives and resources. If peace is possible, even an uneasy one, it is worth pursuing." "I think that's incredibly wise," Kira said, "and brave. A lot of leaders would just double down on security and aggression." "A lot of leaders are fools," Theron said with a slight smile. "I have been ruling long enough to know that violence should be a last resort, not a first instinct." Over the following months, Theron made good on his intention to negotiate. Through careful intermediaries, he reached out to some of the more moderate hunter organizations, offering to meet under neutral terms to discuss a possible ceasefire. Kira stood by his side through the tense negotiations, learning about diplomacy and compromise, watching as her husband that still gave her a thrill, calling him that navigated complex political waters with skill born of centuries of experience. Not all the hunters were willing to listen. Some attacked the negotiation sites, forcing Theron's guards to defend them. But slowly, painfully, progress was made. Agreements were reached about territory, about acceptable vampire behavior, about consequences for those who violated the terms. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a foundation that could be built upon. Through it all, Kira grew into her role as queen. She heard disputes between court members, offered her perspective on policy decisions, and became an advocate for those vampires who had less power and influence. She discovered she had a talent for seeing solutions that others missed, for finding compromises that satisfied multiple parties. Theron told her she was a natural leader, and watching the court begin to turn to her with the same respect they showed him filled her with pride. One evening, about 6 months after the wedding, Kira and Theron stood in the garden, watching the artificial stars that had been installed in the cavern ceiling twinkle like the real thing. Kira leaned against her husband's side, feeling content in a way that still sometimes surprised her. "Do you ever miss it?" Theron asked quietly. "Your old life, the sunlight, being human?" Kira considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the sun. I remember how it felt on my skin, warm and bright. And I miss some of the simplicity of being human, not having to worry about politics or hunters or centuries-old grudges." She turned to look up at him. "But I don't regret this choice for even a second. Everything I gave up is nothing compared to what I gained. You, this life, the chance to make a real difference for people who need someone to stand up for them. I wouldn't trade any of that for sunlight." Theron kissed her forehead tenderly. "You are remarkable. Do you know that? You have transformed not just yourself, but this entire court." They are better, kinder, more hopeful because of your influence. We're better together, Kira said. You make me better too, you know. You've taught me to be brave, to stand up for what I believe in, to see the value in myself. Then we are fortunate indeed to have found each other, Theron said. Two people who were incomplete, who stumbled into each other's lives and discovered they were meant to be whole together. They stood in the garden for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, talking about their plans for the future. They discussed the possibility of traveling to visit other vampire courts, of establishing more formal alliances, of perhaps even starting a family eventually. Vampire children were rare but not impossible, though the process was complicated. I want to build something that lasts, Kira said. Not just for us, but for all the vampires who will come after us. A world where they don't have to hide in fear, where they can exist in balance with humanity instead of conflict. That is an ambitious goal, Theron said, but his eyes were warm with approval. One that will likely take centuries to achieve. Good thing we have centuries, Kira said with a smile. As the months turned to years, that vision slowly began to take shape. The peace accords with the hunters held, though there were occasional violations on both sides that required negotiation and sometimes punishment. The sanctuary expanded, and other vampire communities began to look to Theron's court as an example of how to coexist with the modern world. Kira's role as queen became not just ceremonial, but essential, her compassion and insight helping to guide policy and resolve conflicts. She and Theron grew together, their love deepening with each passing year. They learned each other's quirks and preferences, discovered shared passions for art and literature, and built a partnership that was equal parts romance and genuine friendship. They had disagreements. Of course, both were strong-willed and opinionated, but they learned to talk through their differences, to compromise without sacrificing their core beliefs. The threat of the hunters never entirely disappeared, but it became manageable, something they could defend against without living in constant fear. The sanctuary's wards were eventually restored, though it took a different ritual, one that Kira helped to design using both vampire magic and her own unique perspective as someone who had lived in both worlds. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Theron took Kira back to the ritual chamber where they'd first encountered each other. It had been converted into something more beautiful, a memorial garden with the original circle of candles preserved at its center. 5 years ago, you stumbled through those doors and changed my world forever, Theron said, taking both her hands in his. I was performing a ritual that seemed important at the time, but I stopped everything the moment I saw you, because even then, I think I knew. I knew you were special, that you were mine, that nothing mattered more than making sure you were safe and unafraid. And I stumbled into the Vampire King's midnight ritual, terrified and lost, and found the love of my life, Kira said, tears of joy streaming down her face. You shielded me from fear, from harm, from loneliness. You gave me a purpose and a home and a love I never dreamed possible. I would do it all again, Theron said fiercely. Every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of uncertainty, because it led me to you, and you are worth everything. They kissed in the center of the ritual circle, surrounded by candlelight and the weight of history. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from that impossible first meeting. And as they held each other, both of them knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning, that they had eternity ahead of them to love and laugh and build the world they wanted to see. Kira had started as a lost bookstore clerk, stumbling into a world of vampires and magic by pure accident. But she had become a queen, a leader, a force for positive change in a society that desperately needed it. And Theron, the ancient vampire king who had thought himself beyond the reach of genuine love, had found in her someone who saw past the power and immortality to the man beneath, someone who loved him for who he was rather than what he could offer. Together, they were unstoppable. Together, they were home. And as the years stretched into decades and eventually centuries, their love only grew stronger, a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed dark. They faced challenges, overcame enemies, celebrated victories, and mourned losses. But through it all, they had each other, and that made every trial bearable, every joy complete. The Vampire King and his human-turned vampire queen became legends in their own right, Stories told to young vampires about how love could bridge any divide, how courage and compassion could change the world. And when they looked back on their long lives together, both of them traced everything good back to that one fateful night when a scared young woman stumbled into a ritual chamber and a powerful king stopped everything to shield her, recognizing in that moment that he had found his destiny, his equal, his eternal love. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the power or the politics, not the battles fought or the treaties signed. What mattered was the love they shared, the partnership they had built, the life they had created together against all odds. They had started as strangers from different worlds, but they had become two halves of a whole that would endure for all of time. And every night, when they retired to their chambers and held each other close, they whispered the same words, a ritual more important than any magical ceremony could ever be. I love you, and I love you, forever. Forever, it turned out, was exactly long enough when you spent it with the right person. And Kira and Theron had found each other, had chosen each other, and would continue choosing each other for all the endless nights to come. The story of the girl who stumbled into the Vampire King's midnight ritual and the king who stopped everything to shield her became a love story for the ages, passed down through generations as proof that true love existed, that it could overcome any obstacle, bridge any gap, heal any wound. And somewhere in a sanctuary beneath a modern city, in chambers decorated with silver and midnight blue, the king and queen who had lived that story held each other close and smiled, knowing they had found something more precious than immortality, more powerful than any magic. They had found home, they had found love, they had found forever, and that was more than enough.